Ever try to play along with a classic Van Halen track and it just sounds off? You tune down a half step, but for some reason it just doesn't quite sound right. It's not your ear and it's not your gear. The fact is, Eddie didn't tune precisely to E flat, and he even said so himself. In this video, I'll show you what that actually means, plus I'm going to show you two ways to get your tuning either dead on or pretty damn close. And the second one won't cost you one red cent. Little spoiler alert for you, this actually goes much deeper than just one setting or one tuning, but what I'm going to share with you in this video will get you sounding way closer right away. So let's get to it. Including sharps and flats, there are 12 repeating notes in Western music, each separated by a semitone, and this is what we call the chromatic scale. These notes just repeat over and over again, each time starting with a new octave. Now each one of these notes can also be subdivided into 100 cents, similar to how we divide our dollar into 100 pennies. Since each fret on the guitar represents one of these notes, or semitones, we can also say that each fret represents 100 cents. Since my guitar is tuned to E flat, if I play the low E string with my finger on the first fret, the resulting pitch that sounds is actually an E, as shown on my tuner. If I then play the open string, which is one fret lower, that's one semitone lower. In this case, E flat, 100 cents lower than the E that I played first. Classic Roth era Van Halen exploited the use of these cents and kinda in between the cracks tunings all the time, usually landing kinda somewhere in the ballpark of 25 to 30 cents sharp of true E flat. Although in reality there's quite a bit of variation throughout the catalog. In his 1980 interview with Joss Obrecht, Eddie stated himself that the band tuned down about a quarter of a step, and he also noted that he'd tuned his own guitars as opposed to having his tech do it. You can hear this at around the 33-minute and 20-second mark of tape 2 of the interview, which you can find here on YouTube, and in fact I'll link it in the description for you. If you happen to be a Van Halen nerd like myself and you haven't heard these yet, I highly recommend you check them out. There's some really interesting, cool stuff in this interview. Personally, I started to become aware of this tuning anomaly back when I started doing my own transcriptions, and then when the isolated guitar tracks became available, the discrepancies from E flat became so evident to me that I could not unhear it. Let me know in the comments if you ever noticed that Van Halen wasn't a true half-step flat, or if you've run into tuning challenges with any other artists. I have noticed it with certain other bands as well. And I have a theory about that, which I'll probably cover in a future video. That one might ruffle a few feathers. Once I noticed this, I couldn't play along with the recordings anymore without either cringing or playing kind of tentatively because I was so conscientious about being out of tune. I thought I must be either crazy or my ears were deceiving me, so I did what anybody with common sense would do in the 21st century. I took to Google and started looking for other people out there to either validate what I was thinking or prove to me that I was on Crazy Island. As it turns out, I did find one such kindred soul, Alan Garber, and I happened to stumble upon his forum posts on the old VH Links forum. Alan made me confident that I actually was not crazy and that in fact Eddie had quite the arsenal of what we call sweetened tunings. And I'll touch more on that in a future video too. I'll also link to that forum in the description in case you want to have a look for yourself. It's incredibly informative and interesting. Alright, so there's a couple ways you can handle this tuning issue. The first is completely accurate and the second is totally free. Method 1, get yourself a strobe tuner capable of handling these fine adjustments, like the one you've already seen in my video here earlier. A Peterson strobe tuner can precisely tune to within 1/10 of a cent. Basically what that means is the Peterson strobe tuner doesn't just split these semitones into the 100 cents. It takes it a step further. It breaks it into 1,000 increments. I don't know what we'd call that, so I'll just stick with their terminology, 1/10 of a cent. Now if you get one of these, you can just load right into it an appropriate sweetened tuning preset, and it honestly couldn't be any easier. In fact, if you want to grab for yourself the Peterson tuner I'm using, I'll put a link to that in the description. It is an affiliate link, so you won't pay any more, but I will make a small commission for the referral. And if you want to play some of Eddie's classic riffs and licks once you get your tuning straightened out, I've got a collection of tabs of some of his most famous techniques. Just comment tabs down below and I can get that out to you. For today's case study, we'll be looking at Runnin' with the Devil off the debut album. I've tuned my EV8 Shark guitar to that Peterson sweetened tuning preset, and I'll demonstrate just how perfectly that matches the track after I show you the free way to be in tune with the track. Now the second method to be able to play along with your CDs or MP3s and sound pretty good is free, like I mentioned. You can get damn close by just adjusting the pitch of your tracks. I'm going to quickly demonstrate how that works, and this is free. You can just use Audacity, which is a free digital audio workstation type of software. It's on my screen right here right now. I'll put a link for that download in the description so it's easy for you if you want to do it this way. So all you got to do here is import your audio. File, import audio, navigate to your track. There are certain file types that won't work, but MP3s are fine. I think a WAV file is probably fine because you can export as a WAV, but like the WMA file or whatever a native CD is, that did not work. I tried it before I started filming this video. So click open there. Now it imports your track. Stereo track, left and right channels. So what you want to do next is go up here and click select all, and then when it highlights it all, that means whatever you put as your next thing is going to affect everything that's highlighted, which is what we want. So now what we want to do is we want to go to effect, and then we go down to pitch and tempo, and we're going to change the pitch. Now here's the thing, this can be a little bit confusing for a couple reasons. For one thing, we're going to concern ourselves where it says semitones, half steps. You don't want, if you're going to do, I mean, you could do one, like let's say if you have a guitar that's tuned to E standard and maybe it's a Floyd Rose and you want to play with something that truly is an E flat, maybe you want to change it by a full semitone. So you can, there's those applications as well. This is actually a pretty versatile tool here. But what we're doing is we're looking for one of these micro adjustments, right? So we're dealing with cents. So we want less than a half step, less than a semitone, which means our number has to be like anywhere from 0.01 up to 0.99, because you get to have 2 decimal places here. And you want the cents entered like you would in money. So if you wanted to make a pitch 25 cents sharper, you wouldn't have the negative, you would do it like this. You would have 0.25. That would increase the pitch by 25 cents. Now if I wanted to decrease it by 25 cents, make it flatter, then you put the negative sign in front of it, and then it does this calculating stuff down here on its own. Like I mentioned, if you enter 1, you'd be changing it by a whole semitone. You could enter 2 and change it by a whole tone. You know, if maybe you want to play like with some Motley Crue tracks or something, for example. So, but when we're talking about classic Van Halen, most of these are going to be kind of probably in that 25 to 50 cents ballpark. And usually we're going to be wanting to flatten it because, as I mentioned, he's a little bit sharper than E flat. Since we're changing the track and not the guitar, what we want to do is flatten the track so it comes down to that E flat level, if that makes sense. So for this demo, we're using Running with the Devil. Now, in order to make my approximation, because you may be wondering that, how do I know how much to adjust by? You could just guess, but that's just going to be a pain. So I did post that link in the description to this VH Links forum where I got all these numbers from. And so and I've got mine separated out by album here. So we're on Running with the Devil. This is, all this line deals with that. What I've done here is the bass tuning that we're deriving all this from. We just assume E flat, and then these are the strings, and it shows how many cents sharp each string is from E flat. So what I'm going to do to make this work, you kind of have to do an approximation. So I'm going to kind of take the average of these 6 strings. And if you see what's going on here, it's kind of like mid to upper 20s into the mid 30s. And then we've got this outlier, the high E string isn't quite as sharpened as the others. So, but since it is kind of on its own, and the bulk of them seem to be in this 27-ish to 35 range, I'm gonna sharpen the track by 30 cents. Or I'm sorry, I'm gonna flatten it so that it offset the offset, if you will. And then I'm gonna just ignore the high E string, which that's gonna leave it a little bit sharp, but this is just to get us close without spending money. And frankly, the high E string really isn't featured in this song anyways. I mean, there's a few harmonics and a couple notes in the solos, but for the most part, we're not really going to have to deal with that. If you think it's problematic, you could always take your fine tuner and just flatten your E string a little bit until it sounds right. But for the purpose of this demo here, I'm going to go with, we'll flatten the track by 30 cents, and that should get us pretty darn close. So you do your adjustment, and then you click apply, and then you wait, and it does its magic there. And then you want to export this someplace, or you know, if you're not going to use it in the future, you can just play it from Audacity and use it right here. But I always export them, so I have my work saved. So export, and then you pick where you want to go to. I've already exported this for the purpose of making this video, so I'm not going to do it again. But that would be how that works. So you see the trade-off here for doing it the freeway is, number one, it is just an approximation, although a pretty damn good one at that. And secondly, even though we can micro adjust the pitch, it is a uniform adjustment. So in essence, it's still an equal temperament tuning, since the intervals between the strings can't be changed, and we just don't have that level of control with a recorded track. But the overall pitch now will be much closer to the E flat that my guitar is tuned to. All right, I got my EVH Bumblebee here. This will kind of be the, I guess, like baseline guitar, the test guitar, whatever. This is tuned to just pure E flat with that equal temperament tuning. You can see this on my strobe tuner. As I pick through the strings, you'll see the note on the display. If you've never read a strobe tuner, the way it works, if the dial is rotating clockwise, then that means that you're a little sharp, and if it's rotating counterclockwise, it means you're a little flat. It should be pretty stationary when you're right on. These strings are way overdue for a change, so I know there was probably a little bit of movement there when I picked those. Also, how hard you pick on them, that'll all affect it and whatnot. So that's just to prove this guitar is tuned to E flat, like conventional wisdom tells us to do when we're playing with Van Halen. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to play through the main riff just a little bit with the track, not too much because I don't want to get flagged for copyright. And some of you may not notice, but as I go through each example, you probably will start to notice that when we're just tuned to E flat like this, it's not the same as the recording. Alright, now I'm going to play it on the same guitar with the same tuning, but I'm going to play it with a little bit of that pitch adjusted track we just did in Audacity. Alright, and now for the best example, I've got my Shark guitar. This is actually tuned to the Runnin' with the Devil Sweetened Tuning preset. You'll see that on my Peterson tuner here on the screen as I pick through the strings. You'll notice that just above the pitch name and just to the right, above the right corner, it'll say RWD, and that's the name of the preset. So that's, you can't see what the actual cents are, but we'll cover that in a different video. Okay, so you have a couple options there to get in tune with your Van Halen tracks. You can either pick up the most precise tuner and use the appropriate presets. This is the most accurate and easiest way, but you'll need to pay for the tuner if you don't already have one. Or you can adjust the pitch of your music track to approximately match your guitar's tuning. This is a little less accurate and a little more work, but it is free. Like I said earlier, Eddie actually had quite a few of these sweetened or offset tunings, but there are a couple that were repeated a good number of times, and I'll talk more about that in a future video. If you got value from this video, please hit like, it helps my channel. And if you want to chase Eddie's classic tone now that you've got the tuning down, check out this next video where I demo a plugin that absolutely nails the classic early Van Halen sound.